Good morning. This is Prepper Nation. I am John. Want to get straight into it. I want to talk about national divorce this morning. I know that's kind of a popular topic right now in the prepping community. Ain't no, you know, I mean, it's popular for a reason, right? Seems to be that we're heading that way. Just last night, Greg Abbott started clashing with, the Border Patrol, and he's using the National Guard. So things are escalating, but this is not one of those, oh my God, the sky's falling. We got 3 days. We got 6 days till it's over, son. It's not one of those videos. But again, it is worth mentioning that the possibility exists that we're going to see a national divorce in this country at some point. Seems inevitable unless we see major change moving forward. But anyway, national divorce in 2024 looks wildly different than the American Civil War that we're used to and that we can study about and stuff like this. And because we're a different country, you know what I mean? I think that's something we can all agree on this morning. We are wildly different than we were back in the mid to late 1800s, right? So, what I want to do is I want to talk about five things that maybe some people have probably considered these things, but a lot of people kind of look past this when they think of the idea of national divorce. For some reason, there are people out there that when they hear that term national divorce and they know at some point it's going to get violent, which it would, I would argue this morning it would, they just feel like they're gonna be clear-cut lines drawn on a map, and it's going to be very much the same thing that America saw back in the day, and that's just not the case. So I wanna go over a top 5 list of the reasons why it's gonna be different and talk about each, if that's okay with y'all. And feel free to add anything else because there are gonna be a lot of differences, not just 5. These are the 5 that came up when I was making the list, and the first obvious, glaring difference is air power. So, back in the day, the extent of any kind of air power that they had would have been reconnaissance balloons, and they were very crude ones at that. Now, I know there are going to be people out there that say, "Oh no, John, there was a prototype and it was a Zeppelin and they were using black powder." I'm not here to split hairs on that, okay? I'm sure there were prototypes all over the place, but what I'm saying is they were using balloons and the such and potentially black powder, right? And now we're using drones with GPS and strike packages and AC-130s and airstrikes with F-15s and things. We just saw one last night in Yemen, but we're going to talk about that this afternoon. Spoiler alert, I digress. Point is, we didn't have these things during the American Civil War. And so this would in turn make it wildly different. We didn't have drones, we didn't have GPS. We didn't have, the ability to use Tomahawk missiles offshore and strategically hit targets and things like this. So it is different. And when you take a look at our federal government and the mindset of our military, hopefully we can all agree on this. They think air power first, always. Air power is used for different things. Again, last night we saw them hit strategic targets in order to weaken the enemy, take out their ability to hurt us, at sea. But again, we're going to talk about that one this afternoon. They have the ability to take out air structure. They would want to control the sky. So, in my opinion, y'all let me know what you think in the chat and comments, please. If we were to see a state leave, and let's just say let's just hypothetically say it was Texas. A lot of you have said, hey, Texas would go, son. And we saw 7 or 8 states go with Texas, okay? In my opinion, here's what you would see. You would see a period of threats and negotiations between the federal government in DC and the leadership of, whichever states left, right? Because they would be forming or trying to form their own country, their own leadership, their own capital building at this point. And there would be that period of negotiation and threatening and saber rattling. But if the federal government ever reached a point where they felt like, okay, negotiations are over, this is not working, it's going red hot, it has to go red hot, they would default to air power because this is the way our military thinks. And they would try and hit, if I were a part of that room full of generals, I would say we need to hit the military infrastructure, we need to hit the leadership, and we need to hit it tenfold. And we need to put an exclamation mark on this. We cannot let this drag about. We can't let it drag on and on and on. We got to end this quickly because the longer it goes on and on, the states that left, their chances of winning or being independent increase, in my opinion. So I think they would hit early, and I think they would use a lot of air power against the states that were leaving. Number two here, more than two countries or two factions, whatever you want to call them, two regions, highly likely. So during the first American Civil War, we had the North and the South. Obviously, we had clear cut lines. I think this time around, it's more of a balkanization, which means we would splinter off into multiple, beyond two. You may have certain regions of the country that say, hey, you know what? We're just neutral. We're not interested. We don't really care one way or the other. We'll back the winner. You may have a situation where, let's take the Pacific Northwest, for example. You may actually have states that would try and go with Canada and say, can you just absorb this region? We don't want any part of this fight. It's not going to be stable, this sort of thing. I mean, it would just be different. And I don't know that a lot of people understand this. A lot of people still have that north versus south, or maybe an east versus west mindset. And that's not how it's going to play out. We were talking in the exclusive live stream yesterday via Patreon. And folks, if you miss, if you want more live streams or whatever, we actually do those 5 days a week there, and they replay over on the bunker. But whatever. The links are down below. Um, Regions. Things are going to be regionalized. Things are going to be urban versus rural in many cases, is what we were talking about yesterday. So there's no telling what side your state would actually fall on. Would it be neutral? Would it remain part of the union? Would it go with Texas? What would that look like for you as an American citizen? Number three, government assistance. And that's a broad brush, right? Government assistance, anything that's coming from the government, even if it's owed to you. So this is going to be SSI and stuff like this. This is going to be, hey, you worked your entire life, you've paid in, now you're retiring, and you want them to keep good on their promise and give the money back, right? Because that's the entire purpose of it. But this can also be people that rely on the government to feed them every month. Maybe people rely on the government to pay for their insurance or their children's insurance or whatever. There's so many social programs out there, and again, some of it is owed to you and it's an actual benefit that's owed to you. In other cases, there's social welfare programs. But the point is, most, if not all of these programs were not around during the American Civil War, right? We didn't have a version of, the Affordable Care Act back in those days. We really didn't have food stamps and things like that. Most of the social programs that we have come long after the original Civil War. And so you have to ask yourself this question, because a lot of people are going to be affected. And I don't think they realize that. They're out here and they're cheering for, we need to have that national divorce. We need to have that national divorce. And maybe this person, is getting retirement checks from the federal government, or maybe they're on some kind of, social welfare program from the government. Look, if you're in Texas and DC owes you money for retirement, and Texas breaks away and, leaves the union, so to speak, you're not going to get those checks anymore. The government's, why would they send it to you at this point? Why would they send money that they don't have anyway, that they've already spent? Why would they send this to citizens in states that broke away from the Union. If you're dependent on the government to feed you every month and you're in a state that breaks away, they're not going to feed you anymore. You understand what I'm saying? Insurance. If you get your insurance through the government, again, you're not going to have it anymore. So this is something people really need to consider, really need to think about before they call for civil war. All right. I do think we're probably headed there at some point. I don't see a way around it unless a world war were to set things straight somehow. Um, and it's probably necessary at some point if we're going to remain free in this country. But at the same time, it's going to affect people in ways they really don't understand. Number four, ports. So America depends heavily, probably the biggest offender, on imports here in 2024. We could, if everything was nationalized, the United States could stand on its own 2 feet, and it could provide for the people that were here legally, just saying. But as it stands right now, we're not doing that. It's not nationalized. We're depending on countries in Asia, the Middle East, everywhere. Send us food, send us oil, send us medication, send us microchips and technology. And so when I think about a national divorce, I'm thinking about those imports, right? Because if I'm sitting in a room full of generals, let's say I'm in Texas this time around, I'm sitting in a room full of generals there, and I'm saying, how can we hurt the federal government and weaken them as a country to where they back off? And I'm thinking about the ports. So, 4 of the largest ports, Los Angeles, Long Beach, Newark, New Jersey, and Savannah, Georgia. These are gonna be vital to the survival of any region that breaks away, any opposing force, and the federal government itself. I think these would become military targets on both sides here. So, the federal government would recognize this quickly, and they would put a lot of hardware, I think, around, let's say, Newark, New Jersey, in order to protect that port. That's going to be coveted. Los Angeles is going to be coveted. Savannah, Georgia, and they would try and hit out, I think, and try and hurt the opponents in that way. Ports are going to be huge. I mean, we had them back during the first, um, you know, American Civil War, but when you look at world wars, even ports are vital. Any sort of war, any kind of conflict like this, whether it's internal or external, ports are vital. And again, getting back to the fact that we rely so heavily here in the United States on imports, that is how you can hurt the enemy. And number five, just the entire, this is kind of a broad brush here, but the entire concept of online dependency. We need online, it seems like, for everything right now. Banking was the first thing that came to mind. You know what I mean? So people that broke away with Texas, they may no longer get benefits from DC. Again, because why would DC do that? But Texas may have the ability to reach out, take the banking system down completely, the federal government. And so the people that remain with the union, they would also not have access to funds and benefits and things. To the same result. The online grid, I think, would break down very quickly in terms of electricity and stuff. And then you get into you can't access any kind of funds through the bank. Well, do you have cash on hand? As a prepper, do you have cash on hand? And then will cash even be accepted? Great. You got a lot of US cash on hand, but you're in Texas and they're no longer taking US cash. Again, why would they? So do you have anything that at this point that's barterable? If the electric grid is gone, we already know this is going to lead to chaos. And I think the electric grid would fail very quickly by design because they understand this is how we hurt the enemy, the opponent. This is going to affect running water for a lot of people, the ability to heat homes, to cool homes. This is commercial gas basically being zapped from the market. I mean, you're not going to be able to use cars once this thing goes around for much longer. And this would really lead us, I think, in the United States to two wars. So you would, on the surface, you would have that civil war going on between two, three, four regions or whatever it ends up being. But the second war is going to be societal survival, your day to day survival, and this is where prepping really comes in handy. Can you make it without gasoline long term? Can you make it without the grid long term? Can you make it without running water long term? Can you make it long term if the grocery store no longer has food in it because the supply line's been hit? Banking system is taken completely offline. Can you survive? These are questions that we need to be asking ourselves, especially before we're out here cheerleading for a national divorce. Sometimes I think people look at the idea of a national divorce and they kind of they romanticize it a little too much. You know what I mean? It would be glorious and it would be patriotic. And yes, it would be in the history books, but to live it in real time, it would suck pretty badly. I'm just saying. Let me know what y'all think in the comments if you don't mind. But anyway, y'all take care. God bless.